Pentax K5. So, am I in focus? I think I'm in focus. Okay. Pentax K5. So we're a few months in now, and how has it been working out? And and there's a few, as with all these things, it's about pros and cons, isn't it? And there's definitely some pros with this. It has, it's just a great basic camera, and in that way it's been really good for me because it's taken me back to basics a little bit. It's not a sort of camera where you can just press the shutter and make assumptions. You really do need to kind of, really think about what you're doing for every shot, which in a lot of ways is good, definitely good. Because we'll come on to it a little bit in a minute, but yeah, so you have to think about every shot, and as I say, basically it's just a really, it's a pretty, it's got a lot of good things, a lot of good features, and a lot of good setup options and all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, it is a pretty basic tool for getting the job done, and you can get the job done with it. I think the ergonomics are particularly good. It has some really nice Pentaxy features, not very customizable in terms of lots of buttons and things like that. But there are some things on the back there, as you'll see. There's things like the green button, which I think is just a Pentaxy thing, which, you can, it kind of means when you press the green button, it means just go back to the default setting type thing. So if you're changing your ISO, which is the button on the top, you can press the ISO button and then press the green button, and it will go back to whatever you've set the default as. Which is actually, it's really, it's very good. I like that. I like it a lot. I also like the live view. The way they've implemented live view on this is very good, I think. It's just one press, and then the back screen comes to life, and you can do all your stuff on there, and you can zoom in for focusing. When you're finished, actually setting the shot up, you can just press the shutter and it'll do the rest for you, and then go back into live view mode, or you can just press the live view mode to come out of live view and then press the shutter. It's it works really well. I think that's really good. So everything you really need is easily to hand. Do I ever find myself going into the menus? No, I never find myself going into the menus when I'm using this camera. Everything I really want is probably on a button or very easily accessible, like on the on one of the command wheels or on the lens or whatever, depending on what I'm doing. So ergonomics, definitely a big plus point. I think image quality, it's a 16 megapixel camera, APS-C. For 2010, it was probably well up there, and to be honest, it's more than enough for most people, even today. Who needs more than 16 megapixels? I know we all like more than 16 megapixels, but really need them? Not so sure. What I am sure about is that later cameras than this have come further in terms of dynamic range and things like that. So a more modern implementation of this type of sensor, it would be better nowadays, I'm sure. The construction of this thing feels really, really solid. It is quite heavy. Can't remember the weight, but I'll stick it on the screen probably. It feels really heavy. It feels really solid. It feels as though you could drop it out of an aeroplane and it'd survive. I don't think it would, but you get my point. It feels really solid. The only other camera I own that feels this robust probably is my E-M1 Mark II. The Olympus cameras generally have that solid metal quality feel about them. I mean, there's plastic on this as well, and rubber and stuff, but it just feels solid. I think it has got some sort of an alloy chassis underneath it, so I think it's it is a robust piece of kit, and that's nice. It feels good in the hand. The other major pro, I think, is being able to just take off your autofocus lens and slap any Pentax K-mount lens on here, and you're good to go. It's obviously it doesn't do quite as many automatic functions, but for me, it doesn't bother me at all, and it's really nice to. I really like having the aperture actually on the lens. The aperture ring on the lens is nice, I think. Personally, I'm a big fan of that. I know some people it doesn't bother. And to be honest, it doesn't bother me that much. I mean, obviously I use the Olympus cameras, and they don't have the aperture ring, and I'm quite happy with them, so it doesn't really bother me either way, but I just think it's a nice to have. And on the subject of kind of legacy lenses, you've obviously got just a vast array of legacy lenses to choose from, and they're good quality. It's not that they deliver poor image quality or anything like that. I mean, they may be missing some of the more sophisticated coatings you get on lenses now to avoid some of the flare and things like that, but you've only got to use a lens hood, or cup your hand around the lens a little bit, stuff like that, and for real peanuts you can get some really good quality Pentax lenses, or Pentax Fit lenses as well. Some of those are still good quality, even though they're from other manufacturers and quite old. Still very good, very usable, and I really like using them. And that brings me on to the cons with this camera. And for me, by far and away, the biggest con is the focus, autofocus, or lack thereof. Well, it is autofocus, but not as we know it, Jim. It's it does depend a bit on which lens if you're using Pentax autofocus lenses, it does depend which lens you're using and kind of the ambient conditions, the lighting and that sort of stuff. The lens that I've got on there at the moment, I can't find, there it is, which is the 35mm limited macro thing. Autofocus with that lens is pretty good in reasonable light. Once the light starts to drop, it's not so good. I use the 18 to 55 WR kit zoom type thing. The focus on that is okay. It's not modern standards, but it's okay. And I've also recently picked up the 55 to 300 ordinary 55 to 300 zoom thing. Ordinary, not a PLM thing, not an SDM thing either, I don't think, just the ordinary DA one. And that struggles a bit on autofocus, I have to say, particularly as you start to extend the telephoto, it seems to get worse and worse, and it hunts a lot. And again, a lot of that depends on conditions, I think. If it's a really crisp, sharp, sunny day, it's not too bad at all. I think as the weather becomes kind of grayer, and if you get a little bit of mist in the air and things like that, it seems to become more and more unreliable. So autofocus isn't great. It's, it can sometimes take several attempts to actually lock focus. Even on relatively straightforward subjects, and it always leads me to be a little bit kind of circumspect about whether it actually produced good focus or not. So I tend to check every exposure to make sure it's got focus where I want it. And one of the good things about checking exposure is when you go into playback, you can set it so that it instantly zooms to a high magnification. So it only takes reviewing your output really only takes a second or two. So that's good. I like that. That's another pro. Forgot that one. Next con is also to do with focus, and it's the focus confirmation. So when you're using legacy lenses on here and you're manually focusing, the optical viewfinder doesn't really provide a great kind of it's just difficult. I find it difficult. The viewfinder, the optical viewfinder, is not really good enough, which sounds a bit weird, but I find it really difficult to focus, particularly as the lenses get longer and longer. And one of them, one of the Pentax M lenses is this this rather fine, I think rather fine, 200mm f4, and goodness me, at the the 200mm, well, it is 200mm, so I suppose on APS-C that's really equates to about a 300mm field of view. But problem is, because particularly if you're hand holding one of these lenses, if you stop it down a little bit, the depth of field is pretty slim, and it relies on you to get a decent sharp image. I find nailing the focus with focus confirmation, even with the focus confirmation, should I say, is difficult. And I have done the fine focus calibration for manual focus lenses on the K5, and it's not really made much of a difference, to be honest. I have adjusted it, but it's really, really hard work. And what you can do, of course, is put it into live view, increase the magnification a great deal, and that's much easier to focus. But of course, when you're in live view, you're on the back of the screen. Do you really, if you've got a 200mm lens on, you can't really be holding the thing out here and trying to focus it. It just, the whole thing falls apart a bit there. So if you're using a tripod, I think it's fine, because you can then use the live view quite successfully, and punching in, increasing your magnification works a treat, and you can get good focus then without worrying about the focus confirmation thing, which seems to have a little bit of a mind of its own. So the focusing again is a bit of a chore, to be honest. The only other con, I would say, with this setup that I found is that the exposure can be quite variable. So again, I check the histogram after every shot, and there are some lenses, it seems, that the 18 to 55 kit zoom seems to always require exposure compensation. So I just leave it, I think I give it a stop. So I give it +1 on the exposure compensation and leave it on that all the time I've got that lens on, which is, I don't know, it seems odd to me, but that is what the sensor seems to require. So I've enjoyed using this. It's been it slowed me down a little bit, which I think is good. Made me think about what I'm doing in terms of exposure and particularly focusing. And yeah, I think it's been really enjoyable to use. Am I now sold on Pentax cameras? No, I'm not. However, I have enjoyed using I've got a few other Pentax M manual lenses, which I picked up, and again, they're I think very cheap for what they are. And I find that I've got an adapter for Pentax K to Fuji X mount, and using these lenses on the X-T2 is it's a revelation, where you can just kind of punch in for some magnification, and then your focus is brilliant. It's just dead easy. So I'm enjoying that. I'm enjoying that, using the Pentax manual focus legacy lenses on the Fuji system, and I'll keep doing that, I think. The K5, I probably came to it, 10 years too late. I think back in 2010, when it came out, it was probably pretty much, you know, part of the course. Although I suspect the autofocus was never lauded as a great thing. So yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and I think it's been good for me. I'm not convinced that I'll be sticking with Pentax for another round of DSLR. The biggest problem, I think, is for me is the optical viewfinder experience. Just hasn't. I think electronic viewfinders are now so good that with the you know, particularly with cameras that have come out in the last few years, they are so good that optical viewfinder for me is a bit redundant for what I do. But yeah, you know, never say never.